NASA is outsourcing its capacity to work on the lunar program, and they're outsourcing it to private companies. And so Amazon had put its name in the hat. Well, I should say Jeff Bezos and a different company that he founded put its name in the hat to win a government grant in order to be part of this lunar program. Now, Bezos has created something called Blue Origin. It's his space program. It's a competitor to Elon Musk's SpaceX. And it turns out that NASA decided to grant this money to SpaceX instead of Jeff Bezos' company. Now, Bezos didn't like that, right? He wants to be part of the action. And so a US lawmaker, a senator from the state of Washington, has come in to essentially carry water for him. And of course, it's a Democrat. The order would come through the Endless Frontier Act, a bill to beef up resources for science and technology research that's being debated on the Senate floor this week. An amendment was added to that legislation by Senator Maria Cantwell, Democrat from Washington, to hand over $10 billion to NASA, money that most likely will go to Blue Origin. So Cantwell's measure wouldn't rescind the grant to SpaceX, but would create an additional grant, okay? An additional contract that Bezos' company would be in line to win. A third company, Dynetics, had also bid for the Moonshot, but the author of the new amendment, Cantwell, offers a strong suggestion of which company it's likely to benefit. Oh, well, what's the strong suggestion? Could it be the fact that Blue Origin is based in her home state? Is that the strong message here? Yeah, I mean, look, she's clearly looking out for business interests that operate out of her own state. There is, of course, quite a bit of lobbying money behind all of this, but just take a minute to really process what we're talking about here. The richest man in the world, the man who has crushed his workers, the man who has reduced delivery drivers to defecating in plastic bags and urinating in plastic bottles, needs to get a $10 billion grant paid by us, US taxpayers, for this project to get us to the moon, which we haven't been to since 1972. You know, whenever it comes to a $10 billion grant on something that could actually help the American people, who are in dire need right now in many cases, there's usually a giant debate. In fact, I just did a long story about the infrastructure bill and how much nickel and diming is taking place in regard to funding for broadband internet in rural parts of the country where it's difficult to get internet in 2021. That kind of nickel and diming, when it comes to the American people, the average American, happens all the time, all day, all night. But when it comes to one of the most powerful men, one of the most wealthy men in the world, $10 billion, let's write an amendment. Let's write an amendment. Maybe we can do 2 grants, guys. Maybe we can do 2 grants. We got 2 wealthy guys here. Both of them, we care about a lot more than the average American. So why don't we appease both of them? It's disgusting. Look, Ryan Grimm did an excellent job reporting on this in The Intercept. I encourage you to read the piece to get a full picture of this story. But he was also recently interviewed for The Rising, and he talks about it in a little greater detail in this clip. Let's take a look.
What's so amazing is that NASA actually went with SpaceX, not just because they were cheaper, but they were much cheaper. $3 billion compared to I think $6 billion on Blue Origin's bid. And they said, look, I know that Congress had suggested that we bid out to a couple of different companies, but we don't have enough money. They had come to Congress multiple times saying, if you really want this project, if you really want us getting to the moon, we're going to need a bigger budget than we have right now. NASA was unable to persuade Congress. The only way that Congress decided to open up the piggy bank is when Bezos and Blue Origin said, hey, wait a minute, we thought we were going to get this contract, but we didn't. And so then all of a sudden, $10.032 billion authorization winds up in this new bill and moves quite quickly. Now it's not done yet. It would still have to go. It still has to go through the Senate, to go through the House. They have to find the money through an appropriation or some already appropriated money that they can move there. But it's a huge win for Bezos and Blue Origin, and it's a bigger win than NASA itself was able to get.
So Ryan did a great job explaining how this all works, right? So it's not as though Cantwell just snapped her fingers and offered $10 billion to Jeff Bezos. The Congress still has to vote on this, right? They still have to approve it, but it's very likely to be approved. I mean, when you look at how the vote in the Senate broke down, the vast majority of senators voted in favor of providing these grants, and so. We'll see what the final result is, what the final bill looks like with all the amendments included. But what persuaded Cantwell? What would persuade other lawmakers? As we know, Cantwell is probably looking out for business interests in her own home state. But when it comes to other lawmakers who might actually vote in favor of this awful idea, it might have to do with the fact that Jeff Bezos has spent quite a bit of money on lobbying. It always goes back to the money. Before I give you those figures though, what I thought was interesting was how Cantwell tried to sell this idea, sell this amendment. I mean, did she have any way of, I don't know, framing this as something that could be persuaded? Like, can you be persuaded by it maybe? I don't know. I mean, could you? Is there something that she could point to as a good reason for why we need to provide two different grants just to ensure that Jeff Bezos is included in all of this? She says, I think there needs to be redundancy or multiple contractors in case one fails. And it has to be clear this process can't be redundancy later, it has to be redundancy now. Bravo, bravo. Was she in speech and debate? She was in speech and debate, huh? I'm sure she won all the gold trophies. That was the worst argument I've ever read for anything. I mean, it's amazing that we need redundancy, but we don't need redundancy later down the road. We need redundancy now. Redundancy now, everyone. That should be her campaign slogan when she runs for re-election. Just absolutely shameful and pathetic. Now, Bernie Sanders is not in favor of this. He says it does not make a lot of sense to me that we would provide billions of dollars to a company owned by the wealthiest guy in America. And the wealthiest guy in America knows where to spend his money to get what he wants. He knows how to get a good return on his investment because Blue Origin spent $625,000 lobbying the Senate in the first 3 months of 2021. Among that spending was $50,000 to a team of lobbyists at a firm called Clark Hill that would specifically focus on the moon landing program. And the one thing that Bezos, or maybe there are other things, but one of the more jarring things that Jeff Bezos has decided to invest his money into that is not a good return on investment is this.
The Amazon founder just commissioned a 417-foot or 127-meter yacht for an insane $500 million. And it will undoubtedly be one of the most luxurious yachts the world has ever seen. And as if that wasn't enough, the mega yacht comes with a second, smaller support yacht with its own helipad. Because why not? This yacht, which has yet to be officially named, will most likely be his second yacht. The yacht is 417 feet long, spanning several decks, and it will boast 3 enormous masts. Across its decks, you can expect sprawling lounges, snazzy bars, huge swimming pools, and enough entertainment to last you at least a year.
So while Congress means tests Americans during the pandemic to decide whether or not we deserve any type of financial aid, they have no problem just tacking on amendments suggesting that the wealthiest man in America should get a $10 billion grant for his little pet project. I want you guys to compare the way we're treated to how people like Bezos is treated. There ain't no means testing. No one's bringing up his yacht, with the exception of Bernie Sanders, of course, he certainly did. But there's no discussion about whether this redundancy is wasteful. There's no discussion about why doesn't Jeff Bezos invest his own goddamn money into his little pet project? Why is the US government having to do that? I mean, it's just, and you see this across the board with every industry. I know I bring it up a lot, but it's wrong that we as American taxpayers fund research and development for pharmaceutical drugs. And then once those drugs are developed, we spend far more on them than people in other countries because our politicians don't represent us. They don't represent us at all. If they actually represented us, they wouldn't allow these pharmaceutical companies funded by us in their research and development to turn around and price gouge us. If they represented us, they wouldn't make these weak, disgusting arguments in the Senate about how we need to waste federal resources on redundancy to benefit Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the country. They don't represent us. They nickel and dime us. They hand out the cash to these corporate welfare queens. That's what they are. That's what Jeff Bezos is. I mean, how many successful corporations do we subsidize through having to pay tips, for instance, through having to pay for social safety net programs for full-time workers who literally cannot make ends meet on their wages? I mean, you want to talk about people taking advantage of the system. It is not the average person in America. It's people like Jeff Bezos who has a little fit over not getting chosen by NASA for their lunar program. It's pathetic. A lot of lawmakers are tweeting very strong tweets though, so we got that.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.